Homage to the Triple Gem. So, warm greetings, everybody. Myself and Borella have come down to Colombo and have been traveling around. And yesterday we had the opportunity to go to this cemetery, which is not far from here, called Borella. And it's one of the most beautiful cemeteries, I think, that I've seen in Sri Lanka. It's these very ornate graves. It's quite large, and even I went there not long, last year, a couple of years ago, and we saw the grave of Anagarika Dharmapala, which was very interesting. And it's interesting to go into the cemetery and spend a lot of time there, kind of hoping to do that during this trip, and Venerable Abhasa is going to go do that today. And when a person spends a lot of time in a cemetery, what they find is that actually, they can often find is that what they look at in terms of when they're looking around and what they see actually has quite a powerful effect on the mind. So one of the things that one doesn't tend to realize is that as one goes around, goes through the day, looks at shops, looks at store windows, looks at people dressed in the way that they're dressed in cars, is that a particular reality is being created. We kind of look at the shop window and we see, some really nice clothing, or we see some food, and we see a nice car, we see people walking by, and we think about getting these things. We think about enjoying the car, or enjoying the food, or talking to the various people and engaging with them. And what happens as we're thinking in this way is that we forget about the fact that we're going to die. That's what happens. That's how the world tends to operate, is that the various elements of it are actually designed in a way to make you forget that the time is going to come when we're going to pass away. And so these visual cues create a reality in which certain things are important. And the interesting thing is that when one goes to a place with different visual cues, go to a cemetery and walk around in the cemetery, all you see is dead people. It's going to be, every direction that you look in, there's another dead person, and it just goes on like that. So this cemetery is actually quite large, and so it maybe takes like 15 or 20 minutes to walk through the whole cemetery. And as you walk through the cemetery and you look at the various graves, what you see are people who die at all these different phases in their life. You see people who are very young when they die. You see people who are very old when they die. You see people like there's one we saw when we were walking in the cemetery yesterday. There's this cracked and broken down like bust, this stone statue of what would seem to be this very kind of like well-to-do British gentleman. So there he is. He's kind of in the grave and his stone statue is cracked. And this is the great gathering place of the world, and it reminds you of a different thing. So the perception that you have when you go to a cemetery is the perception of death, and it creates a different type of importance. I mean, you see a statue with this really rich gentleman who's got, this like mustache or whatever that they used to have back in the day. Or I think seeing movies of people to like twiddle their mustache, do one of these things that really rich people used to do, and there he is, he's dead. And so there you are with other people who are very famous. Anagarika Dharmapala is there. He's passed away. His body, or the remains of his body, are there, and now he's been reborn somewhere else. And so it tends to take prominence as not so much the things that other people value getting in the world, but it's what's going to happen to me when I die, and what can I do to prepare for that? So there's all these interesting stories about people when they find out that they have a certain amount of time left to live, not too long. And then they completely rearrange their life so that they do the things that they feel are important. What you hear about these days, I think we had this movie a few years ago called Bucket List, and on the guy's bucket list was like driving in a rocket car, and he met some rich guy, and the rich guy helped facilitate him meeting all his dreams, like going skydiving. He had some terminal illness or something. I never actually saw the movie, but the preview was enough to give away what it was about. And so this is the message that the world gives us at the time of our death. What we're going to care about is whether or not we've gone skydiving, or whether or not we've been to like Bali and been on a cruise. Something like this. This is the message that the world gives us. Actually, for anybody who's ever been in a near-death experience, these are not the things that you tend to care about. When you are close to death and approaching death, what you care about more is your morality. You care about the good and bad deeds that you've done. So I've told this story a couple times, but don't know if I've mentioned it recently. There was a time when I was a young man and used to get into all kinds of immoral stuff. And at this time, my friends and I, we were kind of out and, drinking and partying and these kinds of things. And I was smoking marijuana at the time. So we get together, we smoke marijuana, and we had this game where you'd go and hyperventilate. You put your hands on your knees and you bend down and hyperventilate. And then as you came up, another person would blow this marijuana into your mouth, and you'd take a big inhale of this marijuana, then hold your breath. So this was something fun for us at the time, to kind of like pass out. And you have all these theories about what's going to make you more inebriated, less mindful than you were before. So we've been doing this, we do this from time to time. And this one time we decided to do it. Next to the road isn't the right word, but there was all these houses facing the road, and we were on somebody's property on one of these houses facing the road, and I think maybe about 10, 15 meters away from the road, so not right next to the road. So we were all doing this, and then it came my turn to do it, so I went ahead and did it. And I was feeling fine. So you would usually have the spotter, like somebody behind you who kind of like catch you when you're about to fall. But I told my spotter, well, I'm feeling fine, don't worry about it. So in any event, done this inhale thing, came up, took my big inhale of marijuana, and then sat there, oh, I'm fine. And told him, don't worry about it, let me go. But unfortunately, I wasn't fine. So I started to stumble, and I stumbled to the left, and then I stumbled to the right, which was the direction in which the road was. The thing that was unfortunate was that as I started to stumble to the road, I started to black out. So I had this kind of like delayed reaction to this marijuana enhancing technique that we were doing. And as I stumbled to the road, I started to black out. I saw these headlights coming towards me, and this sound of this horn like as it kind of came towards me, and I was stumbling head first. And in that moment, I realized, I don't have much time to die. So there was a couple of things that happened. One of them was this kind of feeling of like giving up. So I remember seeing animals. I was staying in a kuti a couple of years ago, and there was these really annoying rats and mice that would come and live in the roof of the kuti, and they would make so much noise that at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. And I was out doing walking meditation one night, and there was also snakes in the area. And I saw one of these mice. It was very fast. They were almost like a blur. And I was doing walking meditation, and it saw me, and it jumped down to the side of the path and just waited there. And then I looked over to where it was, and what I didn't realize, it had jumped on top of a kind of a log or something. I can't remember. It was something that was sticking up, and right below it was a snake. This really large snake, like maybe, well, not large in terms of humans, but for it, maybe a foot or 2 or 3 long, this snake. So it was waiting on top of this log. The snake was waiting down there. If anybody's seen snakes move, they're just kind of slow, and you're thinking, well, what's going to happen? And it made its move. It jumped off of the log, and the snake immediately caught this thing in its mouth, kind of injected it with poison. And then it started turning, and the snake turned its head, and I was looking directly at this mouse's eyes. And the mouse knows that it's finished, it's dead. And there was this look in its eyes, it looked afraid, but also its body just was finished. It just wasn't struggling. The snake injects poison, so that's one thing. But there's also a mental aspect in which, you just know that you don't have any time left and you're just giving up. So that was one of the things that happened. There was just kind of this limpness, like, well, that's it. Here we go. And the other thing that happened was almost one of these cliches in which my mind went back and looked for a safe place to rest, because you feel you're going to leave your body in 1 or 2 seconds. And so it's like, what can you grab onto? And at the time I was 18 or 19 or 17, something like this, a young kid. So I was going back and trying to grab onto all of these various things that had been important to me in my life up to that point, kind of trying to grab onto like academic achievements that I'd had when I was young, or to, various achievements at the world praises, and kind of, achievements maybe in social achievements, people I'd associated with. And none of them seemed to give any sense of refuge. But then I remembered, just kind of incidentally, this time, I think when I made breakfast for my mother as like a little kid, and that felt like a solid thing to grab onto. All these other things, it was almost like you're sinking in a marsh and you're trying to grab something solid, and you're grabbing these plants, but you can grab them, but they have no weight. They just kind of, you put your weight on them and then you just sink further into the marsh. But this good deed felt like a solid log. It felt like something very, very, safe that I could rest on. And so whatever the movies say, at the time of a person's death, they're not going to be so worried about whether or not they've driven in a rocket car, whether or not they've gone skydiving. What they'll be worried about is the good and bad deeds that they've done, the balance of good and bad deeds that they've done. So what you actually tend to find in reality, I mean, now it's maybe changed because of the messaging that movies are doing, is that when people feel they don't have much time to live, they often try to do things that are good and kind of make up for the bad things that they've done in the past, apologize to people, and maybe try to wrap up their affairs. Especially, in the West, they talk about, going and getting together, people telling your family how important they are to you and these various things. And it's nice that people do that. But the thing is, at the time when death comes, it's not usually enough time to prepare. And if you find out you have terminal cancer and you have 3 months left to live, it's good that a person goes ahead and does all of these various things to generate good deeds and to generate good Kamma and to tell people that they care about them. But in terms of the flow of the momentum of their life, 3 months is sometimes just not enough time to change it. So we forget about this as we look at shop windows, as we see these various subtle cues. People who are really nicely dressed, like as a monk, you've got to walk around. You're supposed to look about 3 feet in front of you when you walk. I actually have some neck issues, so looking about 3 feet in front is hard. I sometimes have to look up. And they place all these billboards at eyesight. And everybody knows what's on these billboards. Kind of reminds you of what's important. No, you got to get this condo. There was this one with this lady sitting next to this tiger, or a leopard, and this advertisement for this condo. So this is what we think is important, and this is what we chase after. We put so much effort into getting things like this, and especially into getting the reputation that comes with these things, into associating with the people that we want to associate with. And we don't stop and think, wait a minute, I'm going to die, what's really important? So if we live our life in that way, it creates a momentum, it creates a flow, it creates a push, and that momentum tends to carry one onwards after death. So if instead of this, we visit a cemetery and we look for the cues that teach us what's really important, then we can make decisions which pushes the flow of our life in a different direction. So there's a sutta in which Mahanāma says to the Buddha, he says, we lay people have many things to do, many duties. We're very, very busy. And so what will happen to me, essentially, if I'm busy, my mind is distracted, and then I die as a result of that busyness. And the Buddha, not as a result, but engaged in this busyness. And the Buddha says, Mahanāma, for a long time you've gone to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha for refuge. For a long time you've been doing good deeds. So it's like a tree, and imagine a wind is blowing on this tree as it grows for a long period of time, and it inclines in a direction. And the Buddha says, no matter which way the wind is blowing, when that tree falls, it will fall in the direction in which it inclines. So in the same way, when we incline our mind towards good deeds, when we incline our mind towards keeping the precepts, when we incline our minds towards meditation, we're inclining our mind in a good direction. And no matter which way the wind blows when we fall, then we will tend to fall in that direction. The critical thing about this is that this is a choice that people generally have to make early on. It's kind of everything. I was talking to a financial advisor, not that I have money. I'm coming up with this meditation course, and one of the really important things that the Buddha taught for lay people was to be debt-free, essentially, and to spend less than you earn. And he told me something really interesting. He's like, people don't know how easy it is to have $1 million worth of capital. He said, if you start saving like $300 or $400 a paycheck when you're in your 20s, the compound interest from that will make you a millionaire. Basically, by the time you're in your 40s, I mean, you can almost retire when you're 40 or 50 if you're disciplined doing this. And a similar principle applies to the good deeds that we do. Kind of at the time of our death, if we've been doing good deeds for a long time, we've been practicing for a long time, the way that the Buddha's teachings work is it's not just like adding one thing on top of another. The Buddha's teachings and the trainings that he gives us add together exponentially. They stack exponentially. So sīla, samadhi, paññā, these things build on each other exponentially. And if we implement them early on, we don't just think to ourselves, well, I've got plenty of time, I gave a dāna here, I did a puja there. But we actually make these things a central part of our life, then they can build exponentially. And at the time of our death, we won't regret that. But more importantly, the perception of death brings us knowledge, brings us an idea of what it is that we should really be placing our importance on, which is not just going to heaven, but it's the fact that we live and we're going to die. And no matter where we end up, we're going to live and die in some state or another. And you look at the cemetery, it's just filled with rows and rows and rows and rows of graves. This one is huge. It's just filled with people. These are actually the great gathering places of the world. So I was reading this description of a monk who attained arahantship not long ago, maybe actually a year or two ago. And he said that at the moment that he attained arahantship, he remembered all of his past lives. It was he said the number of times that he died would be enough to basically take his corpses and place them all over Thailand, and it would cover the whole of Thailand. It was his corpses, the number of times that he'd been born and that he died, come back to suffer. And so we were reminded of this when we go to the cemetery and we look at these graves. This is the number of times that I've died would fill this cemetery and more. And so long as I don't escape from this, I'm going to be coming back for more. And not necessarily as a human. It's a lot easier to go to the lower realms. So the Buddha teaches us a way to find what's really important. He teaches us a way to find morality, to find generosity, and to find meditation. And if we practice these things sincerely, then at the time of our death, we'll lean in a good direction. But more importantly, if we practice them well, then we can find a refuge. We can find a refuge that's true. We can find a refuge that's peaceful. We can find a refuge from death. And in turn, we can find a refuge from life. Because that's the message that all of these dead bodies, all of these graves are giving us, that life and death are one and the same. There's no basically getting one without the other. And so if we don't want to suffer from death, then we have to find a way beyond life as well. We have to find something that transcends them both, that isn't born, and that doesn't die. And this is something that's truly safe. So the Buddha gives us this message. He gives us this teaching. He points us towards these things. And it's up to us to follow them, because the Buddha's teachings build exponentially. And for one who invests well, who invests when they're young, who invests early, it doesn't necessarily have to be when you're young, whenever you notice it, then these things can build in such a way that they can penetrate to something that's unborn, unformed, uncreated, and unoriginated. And just this, the Buddha teaches us, is the ending of suffering.